Do we have a space gene? Ooh. Hi, I'm Emma.
And I'm Rachel.
And we are the Steministas. We educate the public about science and the news. So you may have seen the news recently about this astronaut that came back from a whole year in space. And he actually has a twin brother who's also an astronaut. So scientists were like, hey, why don't we do this cool twin study and see how being in space affects what happens to your genes.
Right.
And so the scientists came down, they've been researching this ever since he came back, which was like a year ago. And NASA told the public that his genes changed by 7%. Saying that he was 7% different from his brother.
Like physical changes in his genes? Like there's actual mutations in his genes.
They were saying that 7% of his genes completely changed. And his brother tweeted like, hey brother, are we even related anymore? Because we're 7% different.
First of all, that's impossible when you consider that every human being is 99.9% similar to every other human being. So I'm already a little skeptical at the outset.
NASA actually came and said that they made a huge mistake. And they said that it's not the genes changing themselves, it was the expression of the genes. So what genes were turned on and what genes were turned off.
Right.
So saying that the radiation from the sun or like just having no gravity turned certain genes on and turned certain genes off. I mean, NASA called these genes the space genes, or the genes that are changing. And they said there are 200,000 of these genes that have the gene expression changing. But, I mean, we should ask the question, like, should we call these genes space genes?
Right. I mean, there are other things that can cause changes in gene expression.
Yeah.
Like harsh conditions, like deep-sea divers.
That's a great example. I mean, these people are subjected to a ton of pressure that their body is not used to withstanding. So I think kind of calling them space genes is a little bit of a misnomer.
Yeah, a little limiting.
Yeah. I mean, once we get more data, say, from these people that go to Mars and can give us genetic information, maybe we'll know, okay, this gene is specifically changing when you're exposed to, like, conditions of space. But to say, oh, do we have a space gene? Ooh. It's very science fiction.
So what do you mean by gene expression changing? Like, I think most people understand that genes can have mutations and that's a physical change in the gene, but how can the gene expression cause differences for people?
Yeah, so the field of study that is actually called epigenetics. So the word epi means above, and then genetics means genetics. So it's kind of like saying that there's something that's above the genes. And so I like to think about it kind of in the context of our book analogy. DNA is the kind of instruction manual for how your body produces all your proteins and all the different things that you need. And the epigenetics, these marks are almost like highlights. So you can maybe highlight one of these specific words that you need to code for a certain protein, and this highlight could tell your body, oh, make more of this gene to produce this protein. Or maybe you could italicize a word to kind of ignore it and move on. But the important thing about these highlights is that they are reversible. So they don't stay. They can be put on and taken off, which is why when they say gene expression, it's how your genes are turned on and off. And they're turned on and off by these epigenetic marks that can be removed.
So if I was hungry or tired, my body might make a highlight for a gene involved in like producing energy. So my cells could produce more energy while waiting for me to eat more food.
I think the astronaut that went up was Scott Kelly out of the Kelly twins. The other one's Mark. So Scott, when he came back down, they saw that he had there were some changes in how he breathes and also in his muscle cells because there wasn't zero gravity. And they also saw some differences in these things called telomeres, which are how your body knows if you're aging or not. So telomeres they shorten as you grow older, and they're longer if you're younger. So they saw that his telomeres lengthened after a little bit of time in space, but then after 2 days back on Earth, they actually went back to their normal length compared to his brother.
More and more, like, space travel is becoming an actual possibility for us.
Yeah.
Right? And Elon Musk, I think, said he's going to be starting that up soon.
With his car he sent out into space.
So this is actually a really important study. If we're going to be sending people out into space, we should know how it's going to affect their genes.
Yeah, and I know if there's any like adverse effects that we should watch out for. I think it's really important that we're doing this. Right. So this is kind of a new step for NASA in doing this twin study, as they called it, and they have. I think there's 10 different researchers that are still working with the genetic information from both brothers, and they're trying to find more findings and other things that have changed between the brothers. And they're hoping to release an article, I think later this year or early next year, talking about that.
So it's kind of interesting that they're doing this in twins, because twins provide an important opportunity for researchers. They can study this question of what really makes us us. Is it our genetic information or is it our environment? So by using these two brothers, they're identical twins. They have 100% the same genetic information, not the 99.9 the rest of us have. And so that's like the perfect control that you could only wish for.
Right.
I mean, we can control if we do animal experiments in the lab, we work with a lot of inbred mice strains that are virtually genetically identical, but with people, obviously we can't control breeding. So these twins provide a really helpful resource for researchers.
And they're interesting too because both of them have been Navy captains and both of them are astronauts. So like their early environment has been the same. So which means that like one going up to space and the other staying here means that it is a really, really good control because they've had similar experiences in their life.
Right. So if there's any other twins out there, deep sea diving next.
Yeah, we could use your DNA and tell you